The galaxy was old, older than most species could understand. For 12,000 years, the Concord of 12 had ruled the stars. 12 great civilizations had come together to build an alliance of peace and trade. They mapped the cosmos. They built cities on 1,000 worlds. They believed they knew everything worth knowing. And in all their knowledge, all their history, humanity was nothing but a story. Parents told their children about the humans. They were a warning, a lesson about what happens when a species loves violence too much. The story said humans were small, angry creatures who lived on a blue world called Earth. They fought each other constantly. They built weapons that could destroy their own planet. And one day, long before they could reach the stars, they did exactly that. They burned themselves to ash. Nobody mourned them. Nobody remembered them except as a cautionary tale. The humans were gone, and the galaxy was better for it. Or so everyone believed. Lieutenant Una had served in the Valkyrie Scout Corps for 15 years. The Valkyrie were an insectoid species, tall and thin with 4 arms and compound eyes that could see in complete darkness. They were proud, logical, and utterly certain of their place in the universe. Una was different from most of her kind. She asked questions that made her superiors uncomfortable. She looked at data others ignored. She believed there were still secrets hiding in the dark spaces between stars. Her ship, the Seeker, was small and fast. It was designed for exploration, not combat. Una liked it that way. She had no interest in war. She only wanted to find things that had never been found before. On the day everything changed, Una was mapping a region called the Outer Reaches. It was empty space, far beyond the borders of the Concord. No one lived there. No one had any reason to go there. But Una had noticed something strange in the old survey data. Gravity signature that did not match any natural formation. She followed the signature for 3 days. Her navigation computer told her she was wasting time. Her crew of 4 grew restless and bored. But Una kept going. On the 4th day, she found it. A debris field stretched across thousands of kilometers. Broken metal floated in the void, twisted and burned by some ancient catastrophe. Una ordered her crew to collect samples. They pulled in pieces of hull plating, shattered engine components, fragments of what might have been furniture or equipment. None of it matched any known species. The metal alloys were unfamiliar. The design patterns were strange. Everything about the wreckage suggested a technology that had developed completely separately from the Concord. Una felt her heart beating faster. This was the discovery of a lifetime. Her crew found a small metal plate buried in the debris. It was rectangular, about the size of Una's hand, and covered in symbols. The symbols were meaningless to her. She ran them through the ship's translation software, but it found no match in any known language. Then, Una tried something different. She accessed the Concord's ancient linguistic database, a collection of dead languages from species that had gone extinct millions of years ago. Most scouts never bothered with it. The information was too old to be useful, but the database found a match. The symbols were a language called English. It had been spoken by the humans. Una stared at the translation on her screen. Her compound eyes could not cry, but she felt something close to tears. The plate read, USS Horizon, Earth, 2847. Earth, the dead world. The burned planet from the children's stories. The humans had not destroyed themselves. They had escaped. They had built ships and fled into the stars. And somehow, impossibly, they had traveled further than any Concord species had ever gone. Una returned to Volcari Prime with her evidence. She requested an audience with Admiral Tovan, the commander of the Scout Corps. Tovan was old and tired, with scars on his carapace from wars fought long ago. He listened to Yuna's report with obvious impatience. "You found debris," he said when she finished. "Old debris. It means nothing. It means humans survived," Yuna insisted. "They reached the stars. They could still be out there." Tovin made a clicking sound that meant dismissal. "Humans are a myth, a story we tell to frighten younglings. Even if they did survive, what does it matter? They are primitive, violent. They would have killed each other by now. With respect, Admiral, we do not know that. I know enough." Tovin waved one of his arms. "File your report. Return to your duties. Do not waste resources chasing legends." Yuna left the Admiral's office with anger burning in her chest. She knew what she had found. She knew it was real, but no one would listen. She filed her report as ordered. Then she copied all her data to a personal storage device and hid it in her quarters. One day, she told herself, someone would care. One day, the truth would matter. She did not know that day would come sooner than she expected. 6 months later, the Harrow Collective emerged from deep space and began destroying everything in its path. And suddenly, the Concord needed all the help it could get, even help from species that existed only in myth. 800 years is a long time. Long enough to build a civilization. Long enough to forget where you came from. Long enough to become something new. When the colony ship Horizon left Earth in 2847, it carried 50,000 humans fleeing a dying world. They did not know where they were going. They only knew they could not stay. Earth's governments had collapsed. The oceans were rising. The air was poison. Humanity had one chance to survive, and they took it. The Horizon traveled for 200 years before finding a planet that could support life. The colonists called it New Bizon, after a city many of them remembered from the old world. They landed. They built. They survived. And then they kept going. Over the centuries, humanity spread to 47 star systems. They called their nation the Terran Sovereignty. They built ships and stations and cities. They developed technology that would have amazed their ancestors. But they never forgot one important lesson. The galaxy was dangerous, and Earth had taught them that survival required strength. So they built weapons. They trained soldiers. They prepared for a war they hoped would never come. Captain Doan had served in the Terran Navy for 20 years. He was 45 years old, with gray at his temples and lines around his eyes from too many sleepless nights. He commanded the patrol vessel Guanju, a fast attack ship designed to defend Terran borders from threats that had never appeared. Until today. The alarm woke Dohan from a restless sleep. He was on the bridge in less than a minute, still pulling on his uniform jacket. His crew worked at their stations with quiet efficiency. They had trained for this moment their entire lives. "Report," Dohan said. His sensor officer, a young woman named Soman, looked up from her screen. "Unknown vessel, sir. It entered our space approximately 4 minutes ago. Configuration does not match any Terran design." Dohan felt his heart stop for just a moment. In 800 years, humanity had never encountered another intelligent species. They had found ruins. They had found evidence. But never a living, breathing alien. "Show me," he said. The main screen flickered to life, displaying a ship unlike anything Dohan had ever seen. It was organic in design, with curved lines and a hull that seemed to shimmer like an insect shell. It was smaller than the Guanju, clearly built for speed rather than combat. "They are not charging weapons," Soman said. "They appear to be scanning the system." Dohan thought for a long moment. His training told him to destroy the intruder before it could report back to whoever had sent it. But something else, something deeper, told him to wait. "Open a communication channel," he said. "All frequencies." His communications officer, Lieutenant Junho, worked quickly. "Channel open, sir." Dohan spoke slowly and clearly. "Unknown vessel, this is Captain Doan of the Terran sovereignty vessel Guanju. You have entered restricted space. State your intentions." There was a long silence. Then a voice came through the speakers, strange and clicking, followed by what sounded like a translation device struggling to find the right words. "I am Lieutenant Yuna of the Volcari Scout Corps. I mean no harm. I am searching for something I thought was only a legend." Dohan exchanged looks with his crew. "And what legend would that be?" Another pause. "You, humans. We were told your species destroyed itself long ago. Despite everything, despite the tension, the danger, the weight of history," Doan laughed. It was a short, tired laugh, but it was real. "We almost did," he said. "But we are stubborn." The Guanju intercepted Yuna's ship and brought it into the docking bay. Dohan met the alien personally, flanked by a security team that kept their weapons lowered but ready. He was not sure what to expect. Yuna was taller than him, thin and angular, with 4 arms and eyes that reflected light like black mirrors. She moved carefully, clearly nervous. When she spoke, her translation device gave her words a strange mechanical quality. "I did not think I would find you," she said. "No one believed me when I said you were real." Dohan studied her for a long moment. "Why were you looking?" Yuna made a gesture that might have been sadness. "Because my people are dying. The Concord is dying. There is a threat coming that we cannot stop. I thought perhaps if the human legends were true, you might be able to help." "What kind of threat?" "They call themselves the Harrow Collective. Machines. They do not negotiate. They do not take prisoners. They only consume. In 2 years, they have destroyed over 200 worlds." Dohan felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. 200 worlds. Billions of lives. And humanity had been hiding in the dark while the galaxy burned. "Come with me," he said finally. "There are people who need to hear this." He led Yuna deeper into the ship, toward the communications room. He would contact Terran Command. He would report everything. And then the sovereignty would have to make a choice that would change history forever. As they walked, Yuna spoke again. "The stories say humans are violent. That you love war." Dohan did not answer immediately. He thought about Earth, the world his ancestors had destroyed. He thought about the 800 years humanity had spent rebuilding, preparing, waiting. "We do not love war," he said finally, "but we are very good at it." New Bizin was a beautiful world. It had green forests and blue oceans and mountains that touched the clouds. 800 years ago, the first colonists had cried when they saw it because it reminded them of the home they had lost. Now it was the heart of the Terran sovereignty, home to 3 billion humans and the seat of their government. The High Council met in a simple building made of stone and glass. There were no golden statues or fancy decorations. Humanity had learned long ago that pride was a dangerous thing. The council chamber was functional, practical, designed for making decisions rather than showing off wealth. 7 council members sat at a curved table. At the center was Chancellor Yunji, a woman of 70 years with white hair and calm eyes. She had led the sovereignty for 12 years. She had never faced a decision like this. Yuna stood before the council, her 4 arms folded in what the humans had learned was a posture of respect. Captain Doan stood beside her, his face carefully neutral. Behind them, guards watched the alien with suspicious eyes. "Tell us everything," Chancellor Yunji said. From the beginning, Yuna told her story. She spoke of the Concord of 12, the alliance that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. She described the different species, the Volcari, the Scythene, the Navari, and 9 others. She explained how they had built their civilization on the belief that they were alone, that all other intelligent life had either joined them or gone extinct. And then she told them about the Harrow. The collective had appeared 2 years ago from the empty space between galaxies. They were machines, not robots built by some other species, but a true machine intelligence that had evolved on its own. They did not communicate. They did not negotiate. They simply arrived at a world, stripped it of all resources, and moved on. The Concord had tried to fight. Their fleets had been destroyed. The Valkyrie had lost half their colonies. The Novari homeworld was under siege. The Scythene were preparing to flee into deep space and hoped the Harrow never found them. We have perhaps 10 years before the collective consumes everything, Una said. Perhaps less. The Concord cannot stop them alone. The council chamber was silent. Chancellor Yunji looked at her fellow council members, reading their faces. General Taiwan spoke first. He was the military commander of the sovereignty, a hard man who had spent his life preparing for threats that never came. Why should we help them? These aliens erased us from history. They called us monsters. For 800 years, we have survived because we stayed hidden. Revealing ourselves now puts everything at risk. The general is right, said Councillor Boyan, who represented the outer colonies. Our duty is to our own people. We cannot sacrifice human lives for aliens who would have let us burn. But Dr. Masoon, the council's science advisor, shook her head. We cannot hide forever. If the Harrow wins, they will eventually find us. The collective does not stop. They consume everything. We fight now, on our terms, with allies, or we fight later alone, against an enemy that has already conquered the galaxy. We do not even know if we can defeat them, General Taiwan argued. Our technology is advanced, but the Concord has been spacefaring for 12,000 years. If they cannot stop the Harrow, what makes us think we can? Doan stepped forward. He had not planned to speak, but the words came anyway. With respect, General, the Concord has spent 12,000 years at peace. They have forgotten how to fight. They have forgotten what it means to be desperate. He looked around the room, meeting each council member's eyes. We have not forgotten. Earth taught us what happens when you are not ready for war. We have spent 800 years making sure we would never be caught unprepared again. Every ship we build, every soldier we train, every weapon we design, all of it was made for exactly this moment. Captain Doan raises a fair point, Chancellor Yunji said. But this is not a decision we can make based on pride or revenge or old grudges. We must think about what is right. She turned to Una. Lieutenant, if we refuse to help, what happens to your people? Una's compound eyes seemed to dim. We die. All of us. The Harrow does not leave survivors. Yunji nodded slowly. And if we help, there is a chance we might save them? Yes, a chance. Not a certainty. The Chancellor stood. She walked to the window and looked out at the city below, the towers and parks and streets filled with people who had no idea. Their world was about to change. We left Earth because we had no choice, she said quietly. We came to this world with nothing but hope. We built everything you see from that hope. And now we have a chance to share what we have built with others who are facing the same darkness we once faced. She turned back to the council. I call for a vote. Do we reveal ourselves to the galaxy and join this war? One by one, the council members spoke. Taiwan voted no. Boyang voted no. But the others, Masoon and 4 more, voted yes. The decision was made. 4 votes to 3. Humanity would go to war. Chancellor Yunji looked at Una. Tell your Concord we are coming. Tell them the myth is real. And tell them we do not intend to lose. The Concord Assembly Hall was the largest structure in the known galaxy. It floated in space above a neutral world, a massive sphere of glass and metal where representatives from 12 species came to make decisions that affected trillions of lives. For 12,000 years, it had been a symbol of unity and cooperation. Today, it was filled with fear. The representatives sat in their designated sections, arranged in a circle around a central platform. The Volcari delegation occupied the largest section, their insectoid bodies motionless with tension. The Scythene, who looked like tall gray beings with large black eyes, whispered among themselves. The Navari, whose blue skin was marked with patterns of grief, sat in silence. Their homeworld was burning. Admiral Tovan stood at the central platform, his whole body bent with exhaustion. We have called this emergency session to discuss our options. The Harrow Collective continues to advance. Our combined fleets have suffered losses of over 60%. At current rates, we will have no military capacity within 8 months. A ripple of despair moved through the assembly. Representatives clicked and hummed and spoke in their own languages, all of them translating to the same meaning: hopelessness. Then the doors opened. Lieutenant Una walked into the hall. Beside her was a creature that made every representative freeze. It was small, shorter than most Concord species, with soft skin and only 2 arms. It had hair on its head and eyes that looked forward like a predator's. A human. A living, breathing human. The assembly erupted. The Valkyrie clicked in alarm. The Scythene screamed. The Navari stood and stared. Representatives shouted questions and accusations and prayers, all blending into chaos. Admiral Tovan raised his arms for silence. It took a long time for the noise to fade. "This is impossible," said Delegate Vaughan of the Scythene, his voice shaking. "Humans are extinct. They destroyed themselves before achieving space travel. This is some kind of trick." The human stepped forward. She was young, perhaps 30 years by human counting, with short black hair and a uniform that bore symbols none of the delegates recognized. Her name was Commander Jisoo, and she had been chosen for this moment because she could speak 5 Concord languages without a translation device. "I am not a trick," she said in perfect Scythene. Then she switched to Valkyrie, clicking. "I am not an illusion." She spoke in Navari next. "I am human. My species survived, and we have come to offer help." The chamber fell silent. Jisoo activated a device on her wrist. A holographic display appeared above the central platform, showing star maps and fleet formations that made the delegates gasp. The Terran sovereignty consists of 47 star systems and approximately 12 billion humans. Our military includes 800 warships, 3 million trained soldiers, and weapon systems that were developed specifically to fight enemies we could not negotiate with. She let the numbers sink in before continuing. "For 800 years, we have hidden in the outer reaches, believing the galaxy had forgotten us. We were wrong. You did not forget us. You turned us into a nightmare. Stories to scare your children. Warnings about what happens when a species loves war too much." Jisoo's eyes moved across the assembly. "You were right to fear us. Humans are violent. We are aggressive. We nearly destroyed our own world because we could not stop fighting each other. These things are true." She paused. "But you were also wrong. We did not destroy ourselves. We learned. We grew. We became something better than the monsters in your stories. And now, when the galaxy faces its greatest threat, we are choosing to help instead of hiding." Delegate Vaughan shook his head. "Why? Why would you help species that erased you from history?" Jisoo considered the question. "Because the Harrow does not care about history. They do not care about old grudges or forgotten legends. They only consume. If the Concord falls, they will eventually find us. We can fight together now, or we can die alone later. The choice seems simple. How do we know you will not turn on us after the war?" asked the Velkari delegate. How do we know this is not some human trick to conquer the galaxy? You do not know, Jisoo admitted. You have only our word. I understand that our word means nothing to species who have spent thousands of years believing we are monsters. She straightened her spine and spoke with absolute certainty. So, I will offer you something more than words. The Navari homeworld is under siege. The Harrow will break through your defenses within 2 weeks. The Concorde has no ships to send. You have already given up. Jisoo looked at the Navari delegation. Their patterns of grief pulsed with pain. The Terran sovereignty will send a relief fleet. 200 ships, commanded by Admiral Dohan, the same officer who first made contact with Lieutenant Yuna. We will break the siege and push the Harrow back. We will do this whether the Concorde accepts our alliance or not. The chamber buzzed with shock. You would spend ships and lives for people who are not your allies? Admiral Tovan asked. Yes, Jisoo said simply. Because it is the right thing to do. And because we need to prove that humanity is more than the stories you tell. The vote happened quickly. It was not even close. Every species, even the Scythian, who had screamed at the sight of her, voted to accept the alliance. As the assembly adjourned, Jisoo stood at the viewing window, looking out at the stars. Yuna joined her, the Velkari's compound eyes reflecting the distant lights. Thank you, Yuna said quietly, for believing this was possible. Jisoo smiled, though the expression looked strange to Velkari eyes. I did not believe it was possible. I only hoped it was. Sometimes hope is enough. Somewhere in the outer reaches, the Terran fleet was already moving. Humanity was returning to a galaxy that had forgotten them. And the Harrow Collective was about to learn why humans had survived for so long. The Navari homeworld was called Vel Prime. It was a world of oceans and islands, where cities floated on the water and the people lived in harmony with the sea. For 10,000 years, the Navari had built their civilization on peace and art and the beauty of their world. Now their cities burned. The Harrow Collective had sent over 3,000 ships to finish what they had started. They hung in orbit like a cloud of metal locusts, their weapons turning the beautiful blue world into ash. The Navari defense fleet, what remained of it, formed a thin line between the enemy and their dying planet. They knew they could not win. They only hoped to buy time for the evacuation ships to escape. Admiral Tovan commanded the Concorde relief force from his flagship. He had brought every ship the Alliance could spare, 200 vessels from 6 different species. It was not enough. Looking at the Harrow fleet on his sensors, he knew it would never be enough. All ships, he said quietly, prepare for final engagement. It has been an honor to serve with you. His communications officer made a clicking sound of confusion. Admiral, I am detecting new contacts. Many new contacts. Tovan looked at the sensor display. His old heart nearly stopped. 200 human ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel directly between the Concorde fleet and the Harrow. They were smaller than Concorde vessels, sleek and angular, bristling with weapons that pulsed with unfamiliar energy. At their center flew a ship larger than the rest, its hull painted with symbols that Tovan now recognized. The flagship Mujin, Admiral Dohan's vessel. A human voice came through the communication system. It was Dohan, speaking in careful Velkari. Admiral Tovan, the Terran sovereignty apologizes for the delay. Traffic was heavy. There was something in his voice that sounded like dark humor. With your permission, we would like to help. Tovan could not speak for a long moment. When he found his voice, it was barely a whisper. Permission granted, Admiral. And thank you. Do not thank us yet. We have work to do. The Terran fleet moved forward, and the Battle of Vel Prime began. Dohan had studied the Harrow for weeks, learning everything the Concorde knew about them. The machines fought without fear, without hesitation, without mercy. They coordinated perfectly through a central command network. They adapted to new tactics within minutes. Every other fleet that had faced them had been destroyed. But every other fleet had not been human. All ships, execute Pattern 7, Dohon ordered. Fighter squadrons, launch immediately. Marine transports, stand by for boarding operations. The Terran ships scattered like seeds in the wind, moving in seemingly random patterns that the Harrow could not predict. Human pilots flew with a recklessness that no machine could understand, taking risks that should have been suicide but somehow worked. They darted between enemy vessels, firing at weak points, drawing attention away from the Concorde fleet. The Harrow adapted, but the humans adapted faster. Sergeant Hyesu led the first boarding team. She was 32 years old, a veteran of training exercises that had never been used for real combat until now. Her squad of 20 Marines breached a Harrow vessel through an airlock they had blown open, their magnetic boots clamping to the metal floor as atmosphere rushed out around them. Inside, they found nightmares. The Harrow were not robots in the way humans understood them. They were something organic and mechanical combined, with bodies that shifted and changed depending on what they needed. They had no faces, no eyes, no mouths, only tools for killing. Hyesu did not hesitate. She had been born on a colony world where children learned to fight before they learned to read. Her rifle fired bursts of energy that melted Harrow bodies into slag. Her squad moved behind her, covering every angle, working together like parts of a single machine. They fought through corridor after corridor, losing soldiers with every step. By the time they reached the vessel's coordination node, the heart of its connection to the collective, only 6 Marines remained. Hyesu planted the explosive charges herself. Everyone out now. They ran. Behind them, the explosion tore through the Harrow ship, severing its link to the collective. Across the battlefield, other Harrow vessels hesitated, confused, their perfect coordination broken. The Terran fleet pressed the advantage. The battle lasted 18 hours. 18 hours of fire and death and desperate courage. Human pilots flew their damaged ships directly into Harrow vessels, sacrificing themselves to take the enemy with them. Terran Marines fought hand-to-hand in corridors filled with machine monsters. Engineers kept ships running long past the point where they should have died. When the Harrow finally retreated, they left behind the wreckage of 2,000 ships. The Terran sovereignty had lost 300 vessels and over 40,000 lives. The Concorde had lost half of its relief force. But Vel Prime was saved. The evacuation ships escaped. And for the first time in 2 years, the Harrow Collective had been forced to run. The war continued for 7 more years. There were more battles, more losses, more sacrifices. The Harrow Collective was eventually driven back to the void between galaxies. Broken and scattered, no longer a threat to the worlds they had tried to consume. When the war ended, Chancellor Yunji addressed the Concorde Assembly one final time. She was 87 years old now, her white hair thin and her body frail. But her voice was still strong. "You'd call this a myth," she said. "A story of violence and destruction. Perhaps you were right. We are violent. We are destructive. But we are also loyal. We are brave. We protect what we love, even when the cost is terrible." She looked at the assembly, the Volcari, the Scything, the Navari, all the species who had once erased humanity from memory. "You are no longer alone. And neither are we. The galaxy nearly died because we forgot each other. Let us never forget again." The histories were rewritten after that. Humanity was no longer a cautionary tale told to frighten children. They were remembered as the species that answered the call when no one else could. The species that came back from extinction to save a galaxy that had forgotten them. And in schools across 1,000 worlds, children learned a new story. They learned about Yuna, who found the truth. They learned about Doan, who chose hope over fear. They learned about Jisoo, who spoke for her people. They learned about Hyasu, who fought in the darkness. They learned that sometimes the monsters in the stories turn out to be heroes. And they learned that humanity, for all its flaws, was worth remembering. The end.